I was home alone and decided to go on a walk with my dogs at the park. I took a seat and let my dog run around for a bit while I grabbed my lunch out of my backpack. I started eating my lunch when I noticed my dog went missing. You idiot, I thought to myself. I only looked away for about a minute. I knew he was still in the park because the whole place was fenced. Suddenly, I heard something. I recognized his bark. He was barking continuously. Soon after, I found him. He was barking at something behind the bush. I tried to see what it was, but couldn't. I then decided to take my dog back home when I heard footsteps behind me. As soon as I heard this, my dog started barking again. I looked around to see what was there, and there was nothing. I soon got sick of my dog acting up and held him instead of having him walk beside me, and then thought the sound of footsteps must have been the wind, as it was grass. I got home and unlocked the door, headed straight to my room. I left the door unlocked because my parents were going to be home very soon. I put my headphones on and started listening to my music. Not long after, I saw what looked like a human figure in the corner of my eye. I took off my headphones and got up. I looked away for a moment to grab my phone in case I needed to call the police. Looked back, and the figure was gone. I walked up to where I saw the figure, and still couldn't see anything, so I decided it was nothing, until I heard my front door slam shut. I thought, oh, it must be my parents. Walked to the front door and looked around for them. My parents' car wasn't even in the driveway. I looked down the road to see if anyone was there, and saw a man who was running down the street that looked like a very similar shape to that figure. I knew that he was the person in my house. I saw him heading in the direction of the park. That was when I knew he followed me home.
This happened last October while I was at work. I work at a haunted house all the month of October. I have for almost 5 years. I'm a contortionist and actress, so I've always been a scare actress in the exorcism and asylum parts of the house. You know, backbends, weird spider crawling, the works. Anyway, being a scare actress is bad enough as is. You're always going to have that one a-hole who gets physical, punches, or lashes out at you. It's not uncommon to go home with a few cuts and bruises after a good night of scaring people, but the rules state that they can't touch us and we can't touch them. The night it happened, I got to work around 5 p.m., already in full costume and makeup, and I signed in at what we actors love to call the slaughterhouse. It's basically a mess hall where actors and customers can eat and chill before walking through or going in for their shifts. After I signed in and got some compliments on my outfit from other scare actors, I walked to the butcher house out back. The butcher house is the costume and makeup shed where actors and press hang out to get promotional photos and get ready to be transported out to their sections for the night. I was really early that night, so I spent a lot of time there. I was milling around and talking with some of the people who trained me when I first started. My trainers were these football players from the local high school who had their own section on the trail. They were known as the clown crew. I knew every single clown mask, costume, and actor in that group, and they are all great guys. But damn, I am terrified of clowns, so they never failed to scare me every day before my shift. That being said, they're all gentle giants, and 2 of them, Ethan and Ben, look out for me. I'm a little 5'8" girl, and in this profession, things out on the trail can get pretty messy pretty quick if things get out of hand. Luckily though, Ethan and Ben were always there to take care of me. Around 6:30, the loudspeaker tells us to go to our supervisor for transport. My supervisor's name was Gail, and she drove me down the forest trail that night with the clown crew. Ethan and Ben get assigned near me for the night, like always, and things started to kick off. The great thing about this haunted trail was that it was a hiking trail from a sportsman's club, so the entire thing took place out in the woods with only a trace of lights on either side of the path to lead the way. So naturally, it was dark and perfect for the asylum portion where we worked. Everything was going great and was running pretty smoothly until it hit around 11:30. This is what all of us actors call the hell hour. It's around these times in our shifts where it never hurts to watch out for drunks walking through. You never know how they'll respond, but usually it's never good. So we all had our guard up as we got into position for next group. Ben and Ethan put on their clown masks and straitjackets and went up the trail to these little blinds so they could jump out and scare the next group. I was the leader of this section that night, which was pretty cool. Since I was in the asylum portion, I had my old white dress covered in bloodstains and some pretty grotesque looking makeup. I was the best contortionist they had, and I ended up getting promoted. I stretched and got ready to do my exorcism backbend, but that's when I saw the next group. It wasn't a group. It was just one guy, and he smelled distinctively of Heineken and Axe body spray. I could barely see in the dark that he had a huge forearm tattoo peeking out under his long sleeves. I felt like he was a huge red flag for me. Not only was he alone, but he smelled like liquor. I decided to do a quick scare and not put this guy on blast to get him out of my section as quick as possible. But he had stopped at the entrance to my portion and was staring at me from where I stood on the trail. I wanted to keep as much distance as possible, so I backed up to the edge of the hiking trail to give him a lot of space to walk past me. I did something small, screaming and twitching but not taking my eyes off of him. I decided to finally do my backbend, but that's when it went to shit. This guy lunged forward and grabbed me off balance. He grabbed me by the hem of my dress and yanked it up, exposing my stomach and spandex shorts to the cold air. I screamed in shock and turned my head to yell for Ethan and Ben, but he put his hand over my mouth and started grabbing my shorts. I bit his hand and he slammed his forearm into my throat. He had so much force packed behind it that he knocked me off the small forest trail I was on, and down a 5-foot drop off into the pitch black trees below. Then the coward took off. I was in pain and couldn't scream for help. I just laid there in shock, my dress completely shredded from where he grabbed it. I couldn't really move until what I could only assume was 10 minutes later, when I finally managed to crawl up the small embankment and lay down painfully on the lighted part of the trail. I started crying almost immediately. Ethan and Ben were there in an instant, covering me in a blanket and holding me. Security had shown up with searchlights trying to find me, and a bunch of actors from the entire trail just stood by in complete shock as I laid there sobbing my eyes out. They pulled me off the trail with all of the other actors and shut down the trail for the night after that. They took an ID of the guy I described and tried to track him down before he could run off, but no one reported him exiting the trail, and he didn't leave through the ordinary exit because he wasn't on the camera feed, and he just disappeared. The first aid team washed all of my fake blood and makeup off and gave me some ice for a small cut on my head, where I apparently cracked my head on a tree, falling down. Ben and Ethan stayed with me and offered to drive me home since they carpooled, but I assured them I could drive myself, especially since I couldn't leave my car there or I wouldn't be able to get back tomorrow. That's when I got my bag and coat and walked out to the now mostly deserted employee parking lot, completely exhausted from the night. That's when I saw him, a guy in a rubber clown mask that was standing at the edge of the parking lot against the woods. Normally this wouldn't freak me out because, I work at a haunted trail. Everyone tries to scare each other, but I knew every clown mask from the costume shed. I've taken inventory countless times, counting and recounting our clown crew costumes, and that wasn't one of their masks. This one had bright blue hair and dark blood all around that mouth and neck, but the worst part was the eyes. They were completely black and elongated to look like it was grinning angrily. I knew I didn't recognize the mask. This guy wasn't even a huge hulking football player like the actors in the clown crew. He was skinny and wearing black jeans and a jacket. Something was very wrong, especially since he was staring right at me. I didn't stop when I saw him, but I realized really quickly that we were both about 100 feet from my car and the driver's door was facing him. I pulled out my keys and really tried to make it look like I didn't see him, walking pretty fast towards my car, hoping I wasn't the one he was coming after. But when I was about 10 feet from my car, the clown bolted towards me at a dead sprint. I never ran so fast in my life. I unlocked my door, climbed in, slammed it shut, and locked it so fast I thought I would get whiplash. I also had to turn on my car and roll the window up. I had left it halfway rolled down and he was sprinting at me. I had just about rolled it up when the clown guy slammed into the side of my driver's door, struggling to pull open the locked door. He kept slapping his hand on the closed window, and that's when I smelled the Heineken and Axe body spray. I have not a doubt in my mind that this was the same guy who had tried grabbing me on the trail. I didn't even hesitate. I just threw my car into reverse and flew out of the parking lot as fast as I could. He only chased my car for a few seconds before he stopped and turned, bolting off into the woods. I pulled over 5 minutes later to cry and call Ben and Ethan. They pulled up next to me 10 minutes later, and Ben drove me home in my car with Ethan following after. Ever since then, I carpooled to work with those two, and they never let me walk alone after our shift again. About 2 weeks later, on my last shift of the season, I was doing inventory in the butcher house as I always do. But I found the mask. The blue-haired, black-eyed clown mask. It was just sitting on the rack. I asked around, but no one had any record of the purchase for it. It was as if it had just shown up. It still smelled like Heineken and Axe.
It was the early 80s. I was about 8 years old and my brother was 10. We were being babysat by a local woman, Sue Jean. First of all, Sue Jean was in her early 70s. She had a very nice 2-story house with 4 bedrooms and a beautiful backyard, with swing sets and playground equipment. She was the sweetest, nicest little round woman you could ever meet. Sue Jean ran an after-school program because her husband had lost his job to illness. It was late stage, and she was just a poor little old lady trying to make ends meet. All of the local moms fell for it. The truth was, we'd get off the school bus, and Miss Sue would force us to line up outside her immaculate home, and then she'd hand us apples and 1 glass of water. The wonderful playground in her fenced-in backyard was for her grandchildren. We weren't even allowed to lean on the fence. Instead, all 12 of us had to sit in the grass in the front yard of the abandoned, falling down house, across the street from Miss Sue's house, clutching our apples and water while she told us the most horrific fake Bible stories. Redheads were evil. They'll drag your soul straight to hell. Satan is red, and hair is only red if the devil is born inside that child. People sacrifice redheads. Twins, evil, period. 2 bodies can't share 1 soul, you sweet babies. Then she would allow us to run around the front yard of the abandoned house, as long as we were quiet, until our parents showed up. We were forbidden to go into the backyard, because Miss Sue swore there were 2 hidden wells that would swallow you whole. Needless to say, my mother pulled my brother and I out of that crazy daycare after a week, and Miss Sue's husband died maybe a month later. Then her daughter had her put in a home. I always thought she was just a nutsy old lady, but then my mother told me that the abandoned house she made us sit in, the one with the wells, was abandoned in the 50s because the family who lived there found their twin daughters drowned in the well. They had red hair. Miss Sue had lived across the street for over 40 years.